Hello, I'm Stephanie Toman, and this is another one of the basic Excel learning videos. This one's going to be looking at mixed cell referencing. So mixed cell references, you might hear about it and not quite understand it. So if you want to know a little bit more on how they work, then this could be a video for you. So we're going to be looking at relative changes when you do an autofill. That's what Excel does generally, and it's because it means that we only have to fill in the first instance with a formula or function, and then we can autofill down and it will automatically change to the cells that it's referring to as it moves down. The absolute is definitely worth understanding, because if you've got something outside of the data, a cell sitting alongside on its own, and you want to refer to that throughout that autofill within the data, then you want it to stay exactly the same throughout, then you would use the absolute. And you can see on here $A, $1. Mixed cell references, they work when you want to keep a cell in the column, one of them, the same throughout when you autofill.
We have what they called relative reference, relative cells. Relative cells are when a cell changes automatically when you autofill it down. So if I used, do you remember the control key? Those of you who made at the beginning of this, use your thumb on the control key and the key above the tab if you tap it. So if we look at the back end here, you can see it's changed from D6 to D7 to D8, which is correct. That's relative cell. In other words, that's the whole point. You do the first instance and the rest automatically moves down if you're going down. Automatically moves the column across the column if you're going across the column with an autofill. And you can see the same things happened here, the E6, the E7, the E8. So that's relative. However, when you've got an absolute cell means that it stays the same. So if we wanted an absolute cell for the VAT, which is in H1, we wanted the same VAT times D6 by VAT H1, D7 by H1, and DH by H1. We'd have to do is this. So back to the values at the front. Let's go to the first one that's been done. You can double click on it and you can work in here, or you can work in the formula bar, whichever way. If you click on it, some people like to highlight it, doesn't matter, and use the F4 function key. So the function key right above, right at the very top of your keyboard, somewhere around near the 4. Tap the function key and it absolutes both the H and the 1, which would represent the column and the row. Tap it again and it only will make the row absolute because it's in front of the number. Hit it again and it will only make the column absolute because it's in front of the column. And again, and it goes back to what we call relative. We want this on absolute, which is both column and row, so it stays in the cell when we autofill it down. So let's tick the little box. Then when you autofill it, it actually works. And if we go to the control key again and the one above the tab and tap, you can see that you've made it stay on H1, which means it's that cell all the way through. If I go in here and I change it back to relative, tick, and I autofill down, when I click on there, do you see how this is autofilled down as well? So when it's not absoluted, this moves down. When I autofill here, that moves down too. And you can see that one's in the middle. And the first one always works. So back to absolute it with an F4. Click tick. Autofill down so you can see it from this view. And you can see that now it actually stays in H1. We move over here, we've got a similar thing here. We want them to stay on here but move across the column. Then we have to absolute by column. So it's the I6 we're absoluting. So we're clicking there, F4, and it's the column. Make sure it's in front of the column. And then when you autofill it across, it works. It stays in A. I6 stays the same, but the rest move across. So that's mixed cell referencing when you've got just by row or just by column. Absolute double dollar sign, and relative is no dollar signs. And you can type them in if you wish in the exam, it's quite acceptable. I go back to values now with my control and the key above the tab key. There's this one as well if you want to absolute by the row. Before we move on, front of the number, and then when you autofill down, it works. Okay, so let's go to your next one. Here's another example of absolution. So we've got our ticket prices, and ticket prices are going to stay the same when we do our figures for how many adults have attended and how many children have attended. So we're trying to find out what the cost of the tickets are. And we've done our first one here, and as you can see, it's 2D10 is the ticket. So that's the ticket times the amount of adults plus the ticket per child times the amount of children. And that will work for the first one, because remember, when you autofill it down, it does. But when I double click on this one, this has moved down from here. It's moved down there, which is correct, but we do not want the D10 and the E10 to move. So back to the first one again, it's the D10 we're absoluting, so absolute completely, and the E10 we're absoluting, and they're the tickets. Ticket prices will stay the same. Double click and it fixes. Notice this value here, this has come up because it's hit a label. So it comes up with an error value error because it's hit a label. But if we wanted to fix it, remember that one's absoluted, that one's absoluted. And then auto fill and it fixes. And you can see how it stays on there. If you double click and use escape key above your grave accent 4 times, you can see how that works. So it's really worth using.